What do you at? Hello everyone and welcome back. So today, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going over a match with my 21st Mythic Sultai deck. I was in number 18 in Mythic last night, and I woke up to number 26, and this is my first match on the morning, and I decided to record it and lay some commentary over it at the end. And I'm going to go through it and pause to explain different decisions that I made, so you guys can get the gist of what's going on in this deck. So first of all, I'm looking at an opening hand. So sometimes you'll see an opening hand where it's like 4 lands and 3 like 5, 6 drops. So like not really a 6 drop, like a Crisis is basically a 6 drop. You can play it on 4, but it's not really where you want to be ever. So I consider it like basically it's either a role filler to hit a land early, which is not what you want to be doing with it. So most of the time, if I'm looking at it an opening hand, I'm considering it to be like at least like a 6 drop. So what you need is you need early plays. So looking at this hand, we have a nice stat erasure on 2, which is going to set up our lands for this Vraska into this Nissa. And we're in the blind, so it's going to be a hand that's good against most matchups, I think. So I'm going to keep. Now, let's get started. So I go over the hand, keep 7. So now, first important thing to note here. I'll play my land first. So the reason I lead on Triumph over Fabled Passage. So obviously, I want to be able to play Thought Erasure on 2. But regardless of which land I lead on, I'm not going to be able to play this Thought Erasure on turn 2. So, unless obviously I draw a blue or black source. So, what I think I should do is I think I should lead on the Zagoth Triumph first over the Fabled Passage. Because theoretically, if we do hit the land drop, which is what we need to hit anyways to win this game, we're going to be able to play the Fabled Passage untapped on 4, where the Triumph's always going to be tapped. Opponent leads on Fabled Passage. I draw an Overgrown Tomb, so I'm going to shock it in a Thought Erasure. Okay, so looking at this hand now, some important things to note. Op had no green source on 1. No green source on 1 means that this Gilded Goose is really awkward. If they want to play the Gilded Goose next turn, they don't really have a good play for their 2-drop. They're playing a 1-drop on turn 2. It's not really ramping them 1 to 3 because they're playing it on 2, and they already have a guaranteed 3-drop on that turn anyways. So I don't think the Goose is a reasonable take. Claim the Firstborn is not a great card against us. The only time it's going to get us is when it either kills a Crisis or an Uro. But generally, both of those cards can gain me enough life that I'm really not worried about them stealing a Crisis or an Uro and whack me with it. The worst case if they steal my Crisis or my Uro is if they are able to deal with my opposing threat or I have no blockers back and they just kill my Nissa. That would be worst case with the Claim. So I don't think Claim's a good take in this hand. I don't have any Uros or Crises in my hand, so I don't think that's a good take. Then we have the 2 Woe Striders. So Woe Strider is a really good card, and it's definitely considered to be taken, but not in this hand, because they have 2 of them, so it's redundant. Also, in my hand, I have a clean answer to the Woe Strider, and a Nissa blocker also cleanly answers the Woe Strider. So I think it's a clear bolus of Citadel here. Alright, hello everyone, sorry about that. I'm getting the video up to 2 times play speed, as if the video is not at 2 times play speed, the video is gonna be over an hour long. Since I'm pausing the video, the 2 times play speed will still give me time to talk about my plays. So now we're Thought Erasure and we have a Pact to Negation. I think this was one of the big turning points of the match. So I'll let you see what I decide to do here. So I tank on this for a while, as is pretty obvious, because this is at 2 times speed. Now, I check, go back here and check that for a second. I check my percentages when I'm looking at this Pact of Negation. So looking at this board right now, I need to draw a land by 5. So that, if I mill this Pact, it gives me 3 draw steps, basically, to look at that land. If I keep the Pact, I get 2 draw steps. I think with my opponent's hand at the moment that they're slow enough that it's not a big deal if I miss the 5-drop once. So as you can see, the MTG assistant is showing me that I'm 52% roughly to draw a non-land and 48% to draw a land. So I'm just under 50% to hit a land. And when I tap the pact and draw the pact, those percentages are going to change to about 50-50. So I think pact, knowing my opponent's hand, there's a few ways I lose this game. And I think the main way I lose this game is either I miss my land here and die, and they just curve out and draw good cards. Or they draw a Bolus of Citadel, and I still curve out and I lose anyways. So I discarded a Bolus of Citadel, but I think the chance that it's a 48% chance going up to a 50% chance that I get 2 looks. So after the next turn, I'll be playing land 3, then land 4, then land 5. And I don't really care if I miss the first time. I have a Vraska and a lot of draws in my deck. So things like Uros, things like Krasis will just stall the board for a little bit longer, right? Just to keep me alive. So in this case, I think keeping the pact is correct, because I think I'm very likely to draw the land. Like, I'm 50-50 to hit the land, and I get to see 2 draw steps at it to hit on curve, and I'm going to give myself 3 to the point where if I don't hit it that 3rd time after I missed it already once, I'm probably too far behind. So I think keeping the pact is fine. I think this might be the most debatable play of this first game. So opponent drew a priest. There's not really an interesting play here. I don't really have a play. I just had to play my line and pass. Don't want to play Fable Passage and Crack, because even though deck thinning is not really a relevant thing when it comes in deck construction, if you're in the match, it's something you can definitely maximize. Now, so this is an interesting turn here. So what I'm thinking to myself now is that I have this eliminate. So Vraska cleanly answers the Woe Strider. And if I keep the eliminate, and I go Vraska this turn, say I have Vraska on the Woe Strider, they just get to go Priest, Woe Strider, and I'm in the same spot. They're attacking down my Vraska, but I have an eliminate, and I might be able to curve into a Nissa next turn. But if I instead eliminate the Priest, I think that's the better line if I'm planning to get, like, if I miss my land drop next turn and get unlucky. Because if I miss my land drop next turn, I can use my eliminate and then hope. Well, if I hit the land and I play Nissa, Nissa's obviously a fantastic play. Nissa sets up blockers, and I can develop my Vraska later on. So if I'm thinking that I'm going to hit my land next turn, and I'm playing to the fact that I'm going to hit my land, I think holding the Vraska is better here. If I'm planning to miss my land, say, then I think I should probably eliminate here. The reason I thought about eliminating was because if I just play my Vraska dies, I don't really get an advantage from it. But if I draw my land and I can play my Nissa, and then I can set up a spot where I go Nissa next turn, they're going to play a Woe Strider. Say they're playing next turn's Woe Strider Gilded Goose, right? If I eliminate their Priest here, and I go Nissa on my next turn, then I get to make a 3-3, which effectively keeps my Nissa alive through an attacker. I have a Pact for a Citadel up, and then I get to untap, play Vraska, minus on one of the other Woe Striders, and then plus on my Nissa. And then the whole board is wild. I have pretty good control over what's happening. I'm not really getting got by Claim the Firstborn because I have Pact of Negation. So that's why I made the play I made here. Which was I tanked on this for a while, and I decided to eliminate the Priest of the Forgotten Gods. I also like the idea of keeping more lands in my deck, which is not really like a super relevant number, but it definitely affects the percentages a little bit. So here I eliminate the Priest, they sack the Woe Strider. They hit their land, play Woe Strider, play Goose, pretty standard turn. Okay. So this turn I draw Thoughtseize. So that's not a great draw, obviously. We don't want to draw or discard this late, and we definitely wanted our 5th land there. So this turn I minus on a Woe Strider. The logic behind this play when I made it was that, so if I just plus on Vraska, I'm not in a good spot anyways. I'd have to sack my land if I wanted any value. Vraska goes to 6. If I don't want to sack a land, they should attack it down with both their Woe Striders. At least this way, I can take a Woe Strider off the table and functionally gain 3 life on the next attack, which gives me another chance at drawing a land for the Nissa. Opponent sacking off here is a pretty standard play by them, just to get some scries, to try to lock up a good draw step by them. The goats aren't really relevant with what's going on. They don't have priests, they don't have a devil. So there's not really a reason to keep the extra things in play. So after this turn, this game's basically over. I don't hit the land. I end up dying. This turn I draw the tap land, and I concede the game. So, I think I made a big mistake in this match, and something that I could have easily prevented. So, in this game, individually, when I top the Pact of Negation, right? My logic behind topping the Pact of Negation, which I explained to you earlier, was that I was pretty likely, like about 50-50 to hit my land, just under 50% for the first one, and then we're going to get to 50-50 once I drew the Pact, that I was going to hit the land drop. But the only thing that I really care about pacting in their whole deck is a Bolus of Citadel. And I already discarded one of those cards. So if I already discarded a Bolus of Citadel, then I think I shouldn't have played like they were going to draw a second one. I should have just maximized my chance to draw the land. Because the way this would have worked out, if I had surveilled the Pact, everything would have been a turn earlier. So that means this turn, I would have had a new draw step, and this Triumph would have been untapped. I think that would have made a difference in this game. So, knowing that there's only 3 copies of Bolus of Citadel left in their deck, I think it was right to not top the Pact, and that's where I went wrong in this game. So in my sideboarding here, you're going to see my my generally standard plan against a lot of these smaller creature decks. I like to go a lot smaller and become the Jund deck in the matchup. I like trimming some number of Nissa, the Krasis, the Pacts, a Castle Vantress, and a Fable Passage, and I like to board in all my Jund elements. So like my Scavenging Oozes, my Eliminates, my Heartless Acts. So basically what my goal is now after sideboarding this matchup is to get out and disrupt them with my removal and my discard spells, which also fuels a nice quick Uro, blow up their important threats, their Mayhem Devils, their Woe Striders, and try to get their life total down low as fast as possible. Alright, opening hand for game 2. This opening hand is fantastic. We have a turn 2 Thought Erasure, we have an Uro, we have an Eliminate, we have a Sweeper. I think this is just a pretty clear, easy keep. On the Thought Erasure now. So notable things when I'm looking at this Thought Erasure. So, first of all, my opponent doesn't have a red source, and they only have 2 lands. So that means the Devil is currently uncastable, and when it is cast, it's probably going to get cleaned up pretty easily by the Eliminate or the Ritual of Soot. So, I don't think the Devil's the take here. Priest of the Forgotten Gods. Priest of the Forgotten Gods, I feel, is the take if I just want to disrupt their curve. Woe Strider is probably the card that I'm most likely to take if I don't want to disrupt their curve, but it also just gets answered by my Ritualist Soot in my hand. Which I can see this game going, where if I take the Priest of the Forgotten Gods, they have to play Trail on 2, and if they brick on a land, then we just get to curve out really cleanly. Even if they hit the land, they're kind of priced into going 3-drop into 3-drop to catch back up, because I'm going to play Uro and get Uro ready to escape soon enough if they just let me pass and go land, go, land, go. Trail of Crumbs. So Trail of Crumbs is the card that I can't answer with my hand currently at the moment. And it is but I don't think they'd play it on 2. Also, important to note, if they miss their land drop, Trail of Crumbs is doing nothing. Trail of Crumbs is going to generate a food, and that's it. So Priest of the Forgotten Gods, since Trail of Crumbs doesn't do anything with mana, Priest of the Forgotten Gods also basically makes their trail useless if I take it, and disrupts their curve. So that's why I took Priest of the Forgotten Gods here. To break up their curve and make their Trail of Crumbs useless unless they draw land. So looking at this swamp here, the swamp's fantastic. I just want to hit land drops for Uro, so I think the swamp's a good take here. It's a painless way to play Uro next turn, and the extra life's definitely nice, where I'm trying to get them to bait into a Ritualist Soot. So the longer I can just take hits and stay alive, the better it is for me, for my Ritualist Soot. Just play Uro. The Scavenging Ooze is a fantastic draw here. Opponent plays the Woe Strider. Draw Thoughtseize. Just cleanly clean up the Woe Strider. So, in hindsight here, I think there was a small misstep on my behalf. So generally, I knew that I was going to Thoughtseize anyways. So if I'm going to Thoughtseize anyways, I should Thoughtseize first. Because if I'm Thoughtseizing first, it gives me the most information that if I want to eliminate this. Because say if for some reason in their hand, I don't want to eliminate this Woe Strider. Thoughtseizing first would give me that information. Whereas me eliminating the creature first gives me no more information for my next play. So I think that was a slight misstep. The cat here was a insane draw for them. Because what that means is now they can start stacking this food and get the Trail of Crumbs going. Every single turn. And we know they drew a second trail and an oven as well. Like, these draw steps for my opponent here are just brutal. The fact that they got the Trail of Crumbs. So, like, when I was looking at their hand before, the trail was awkward because they didn't have a land. So they couldn't even use it. By drawing the land, it turned on the first trail. By drawing the cat, it meant that they could efficiently sack food to the trail. So basically they're only spending 1 mana to get a look at their top 2 and put a permanent into their hand. The second trail means every cat activation lets them put 2 permanents into their hand for 2 mana. And the second oven lets them do that twice a turn. So these draw steps, back to back to back here, were just brutal. Yep, I think this is all pretty standard. I whip out the Thoughtseize. Now, I have an interesting decision point here. So, I know my opponent currently has 2 food. If I just sit and pass the turn, the opponent cannot sacrifice the cat right now and expect to be able to get it back. If I just pass with Scavenging Ooze up. Because as soon as they activate the oven to sacrifice the cat, they only have 2 food, and I have 3 green mana, which gives me the ability to eat it. And I also, if they do it end of turn, it gives me the ability to cut off Trail of Crumbs draws from them, right? Because they don't have enough mana to activate. Well, if they untap, and then they oven, sack the goat, they will have 3 food in play. Then they sack this, they'll have 3 food here. So, I think, in hindsight, you'll see what I do here. I decided to not play the Uro and pass with the Scavenging Ooze up. I think this might have been the wrong play. They decided to block with the goat. I think they forgot to sack it to the oven. And because they forgot to sack it to the oven, so knowing this play now, so I would pass with the Scavenging Ooze up here. Because they didn't sack that goat, this changes the play being bad to passing with Scavenging Ooze, which is what I was planning to do anyways, which now in hindsight would have been bad. But because my opponent messed up and blocked my Scavenging Ooze, it turned my play into a great play. Because now, they don't have a play going on, they can't escape their Woe Strider, so if they're going to sack their cat to try to get trail triggers to get value, I'm going to be able to eat the cat and be in a great spot. Okay, now, so now the opponent's going to sack the cat, and we have the food on the stack, but they only have 2 food, and we have 3 green mana. So now we get to eat the cat. And this here is a perfect example of why you don't want to make all your plays before you declare your attackers, because the fact that my opponent blocked with the goat and didn't sacrifice it made the play of holding up Scavenging Ooze a much better play. Whereas if they just sack the goat and they have 3 food, I can't really fight over the cat. So I think playing Uro would be the better play. That's pretty standard stuff. I untap them my turn. I just want to shut off their Woe Strider for being cast, so I just eat everything out of their graveyard to press the most damage. Also important to note that by pressing the most damage here, I shut off their Bolus of Citadel a lot. So I'm casting Thought Erasure here, knowing they have a Stomping Ground in their hand just because I want the Surveil. I didn't have enough green sources to get any more eats with Scavenging Ooze anyways, so I might as well do that. My logic behind keeping the Heartless Act here is that if they draw something, say like a Mayhem Devil, or any creature that would get in the way of my Scavenging Ooze, or just be something annoying, I can just Heartless Act the creature. I think I have Bolus of Citadel pretty well covered. They can't play it this turn, so that means next turn, they'd have to play it from effectively whatever the life total is, -7, if I wanted to eat my own Uro. So I just go for my Uro here, and the opponent scoops it up. Alright, I like how I sideboarded, and I run back the same thing. Okay, so looking at this opening hand now, we have 5 lands, a Heartless Act, and an Uro. So the Heartless Act deals with an early creature, they might have like a Mayhem Devil hand, that could be annoying, or something like that. It deals with their important threat, their Priest of the Forgotten Gods, whatever their bottleneck is on a creature in this game. Whether it's the sack outlet or the payoff. Then we have an Uro, which is just a great card and something you always want in your opening hand, and we just have a nice solid 2 into 3 curve here. The opponent mulls a 6, and we're waiting for them. Put these off on the Gilded Goose, tap Triome, no 1-drop place, that's pretty standard. Opponent plays a turn 2 Devil. I clean up the Devil with the Heartless Act. This actually worked out fantastic for us, because it let us trade our Heartless Act, not just for their 3-drop, but also for the food off the Gilded Goose. So we basically got to kill, essentially, the 1-drop and their 3-drop with the Heartless Act. Until the Goose becomes active again later on. Let's play Uro. A lot of lands here is pretty brutal. As you can see here, I was 36% to draw land I'm 36% now to draw land for the rest of the game. It's probably a bit higher than that. Well, definitely a bit higher than that before I drew the lands. But still pretty unlucky to hit that many. At least we got 2 Triumphs to cycle away and try to get our land drops out. Cycle a Triumph here, so I draw a Thoughtseize or a Thought Erasure or an Explore effect or a Spiral effect. It could affect my land drop. Since I drew an Explorer, obviously I play the untapped land and not the shock land tapped, because now I can just develop the shock land tapped after anyways. Plays a Wolf Strider. I draw a Thoughtseize. So I fire off the Thoughtseize first, get the most information before I decide the rest of my turn. 2 lands. So, there's an interesting decision point here again. So I look and I have 5 cards in my graveyard. So what I can do is I can either scry to a Castle Vantress or get a random card with Zagoth Triumph. I decide to cycle to Zagoth Triumph because there's 5 cards in my graveyard. The reason this is important because once a 6th card hits the graveyard, the Triumph is going to turn on Uro, which is why I think cycling this is better than getting the Scry 2 here. Once again, just fire after Thought Erasure for the Surveil, even though I know their hands lands. It's just one of the awkward things with having discard in your deck, is you really don't want to draw them when you're at this point in the game. They're really effective on turns 1 and 2, and sometimes even 3, and against things like Control, they're always effective, but you really don't want to be drawing the discard effects now. Opponent scries to the bottom. Plays their Forest. Plays the Trail of Crumbs. So now this draw here, this was brutal. So what Trail of Crumbs does with Gilded Goose is it allows them to just get an engine going where they can just create a food, pop a food, and activate Trail for 5 mana. And since we're not really in a spot where we can punish their life total too much for doing this, they're just going to get to churn through their deck. Opponent activates Trail, finds Cat. Cat once again here is brutal because now the Cat lets them do the Trail play with 1 mana. So they can just make a food with the Goose and do that and sack the Cat. So now they're just getting 2 activations for 6 mana. Which is just really strong because they have this 5 mana loop where they can go make 2 with Goose for 2 mana, crack a food for 2 mana, and then pay 1. And then they can pay 1 off this. So for 6 mana, they're getting to see the top 4 cards and take the best 2 permanents from those cards. We'll take the best permanent from the first 2 and the best permanent from the second 2. A bit worse than the best permanent from the 4, but... So yeah, once again, we draw another Thought Erasure here, which is awkward. Draw another land. And I just fire after Thought Erasure for a Surveil. It's a really awkward couple draw steps here for us while they're hitting some good cards. Definitely the downside of playing a 29 land deck, though, is sometimes this happens, even though we did board down to 27 for these post-board games. Opponent activates the Cat, gets another Oven, which means now is for 7 mana, they can get 3 permanents from the top of their deck. And they have another Trail, so now they're just seeing all the permanents in the world. I set a stop in my upkeep. Make sure you set the stop in your upkeep before you finish activating your spells, because if you do it when the game is passing priority to your turn, even if you get the stop set technically on the screen before it becomes your turn, it's just going to skip through it. So I draw Scavenging Ooze here, play it for my main phase. Arena, also be careful of this. When you're playing Scavenging Ooze, a lot of the time, Arena tries to keep up your Watery Grave for some reason, instead of just giving you the most possible green sources. Especially in this scenario, where I don't have any cards in my hand, I'm only going to see a random draw step with Uro. holding up a watery grave over something like an overgrown tomb doesn't give me any more options to cast any spells in my deck, I don't believe. So I'm just going to activate Trail a bunch of times here now. Hits their Devil, which is brutal. A little bit ahead here. It just takes forever to do these can interactions, so I don't want to have you sit here to just going through the motions, basically. I'm just clicking their other stuff. So, opponent plays Mayhem Devil. I decided to Ether Gust it. I think it's pretty standard. I don't think there was a reason not to Gust it there. Like, you can just get it back with Trail. But if you're getting it back with Trail, they're going to have to sack their cat now. And they'd have to spend more mana, and it'd be awkward. They can't really get much use out of it this turn. Whereas because they have to say if they sack to the cat, right? So if they sack to the cat and they want to spend 2, they had 5 mana up. So then they'd have to sack their Fable Passage to play their Devil. So they're already losing out on that value right there. And since they're losing out on that value, it's just not good for them, I don't think, to do it. So that's why I like going for the Gust here. So Extinction Event was a great draw. I just get to play it on odd. I get to clean up this board. I have the Scavenging Ooze to eat the Familiar if they try to sack it. And if they try to sack it, the most value they can get is 1 Trail activation. And to get that Trail activation, they have to sacrifice their Fabled Passage, which means that they're going to shuffle away their Mayhem Devil. So once again, another important note about Scavenging Ooze. Don't let the auto tapper tap your lands when you're casting spells with Scavenging Ooze in play, if you really do care about the green sources. Because I guarantee you it would have tried to tap me out of one of my green here. Whereas because I auto-tapped it, I could tap all my lands individually. Important to note here also, I felt like I didn't need to leave Castle Vantress up because I was just going to activate Scavenging Ooze a bunch of times. In hindsight, I probably should have left the Vantress up over the Watery Grave, because I don't really have any spells to play, so I'm not really punished for getting the extra colors, and it just gives me an extra option. Important thing to note here, opponent did not sack anything here, which I think was pretty strange, especially since I only had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana up. So with the 5 mana, say if they sack the cat, they're up to 4 food. So if I tap myself at a Scavenging Ooze for them to do the whole thing, it just opens up the window for them next turn to just say pop a food, and if on the first food they find another cat, I'm going to have a hard time dealing with it, because I'm going to have to spend a lot of mana answering what they're doing. So I think they definitely just wanted at least 1 food here. Just more foods makes it more awkward for me to deal with cat. Every extra food they have is an extra Scavenging Ooze activation I have to try and beat these Witches' Ovens. So now opponent makes a questionable play here. So there's no way for them to kill my Scavenging Ooze here unless they want to sack their Devil to their Oven. Because they have 5 mana, so if they pop 2 of their foods, my Scavenging Ooze is a 4/1. And the Witch's Oven would sack to the Devil and would kill the Scavenging Ooze, but they'd lose their Mayhem Devil. So looking at these scries here, I think these scries are fantastic. Nissa just doubles my mana, allows me to activate Scavenging Ooze a bunch more times, so I think I definitely want Nissa. My cards in graveyard count is still high enough to play Uro, so I like stacking the Uro under the Nissa. Opponent blocks their Devil, so they're going to trade a food and their Devil for my Scavenging Ooze. Activate Trails a bunch of times. After 2 Trails, they find a Goofs and a Mayhem Devil. This combination here is brutal, because once again, it sets up the same line of play before, where they can just for 5 mana get an activation of Trail, and because they have 2 Trails, now for 6 mana they can get 2 activations of Trail while also getting a Devil sack. Gilded Goose plus Mayhem Devil, if the game goes long, can slowly grind out a lot of people, even without the Trail of Crumbs. So I draw my Uro, play my Uro. Obviously, the devil triggers on the Uro. So, another thing I messed up here on. I think when I was playing this Uro, I should have full controlled. Because if I full control, if I draw a removal spell like I did, I can kill this devil. And I can kill this devil before the Uro gets sacrificed. And it doesn't give him an additional ping. So that's an important thing to note that I learned from this match. Opponent's doing the sack food devil interaction. Get a couple trail activations. They get a Citadel. From this point in the match, I'm basically dead. I escape my Uro, draw a Watery Grave, and I don't think I really need to show you this much. I'll skip through it. The opponent plays a Bolus Citadel and just ends up just literally going off with it in the same turn. Not really any interesting decisions here for me, and they just kill me with the Citadel. Alright, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.